Alright guys, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how to use the GUI setup within Unity. Right here I'm on their main page. It's going to be your go-to for any questions you've got about GUI. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the basics, some of the things that I think are important when dealing with GUIs. I can make videos later on that explain different parts and pieces if you have specific questions. I'm just going to give you the basics. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use buttons, boxes, the toggle, maybe a text area, and probably a scroll view, just because I think those are the most important things. I'll talk a little bit about using the skin right here, this static variable, and I might even talk about these too. Anyway, for some reason my screen won't record if I do it in MonoDevelop, so I'm going to do it all within TextEdit. Hopefully I don't make any mistakes, but we'll see how it goes. So first things first, you're going to have to create a new project within Unity. So you'll just go Unity, File, New Project, whatever, Create, C# script, and right here would be the tutorial. But since I can't do it in that, I'm going to do it right here. So it'll create the new file, and I'm just going to ignore some of what would be in it. So at the top it'll say using system.collections. It'll say using Unity engine. It'll say public, whatever the name of your script is. So I'm just going to write script, and then it'll say MonoBehavior. And then you'll have it something like that. Next thing you'll see, it'll say void start, void update, and that's all you'll see. So first thing you have to do is you have to do void on GUI. And what that does is it draws everything GUI-wise to the screen. So you'll have to use, if you want to use a button, you'll do if GUI.button new rect. So the way you'll plug this in is you'll start at the left spot where you're going to start. So 0 is the furthest left point. Then 0 again would be the topmost point. And I like to use fractions just because it tells me exactly how big everything's going to be. So you'll just go screen.width divided by 4 if you want it to be a quarter the size of the width of the screen. I've heard that multiple calls to this screen.width and screen.height can slow down your computer, or slow down your program, but I've never seen it happen. So let me know if you guys notice anything, but I've never seen a problem with it. Next thing, you'll be able to choose what is in your button. So you can do just an empty one just by doing empty quotes, which is kind of pointless. You can do a texture, so whatever your texture is, or you can do what's known as a GUI content. And a GUI content is responsible for drawing either a text and texture, just like normal, but you can also draw both at the same time. And the plus side to this is, let's say you want a logo to be the same on every button. Well, you can change it so that it'll be, so like let's say you'll have your string, so your text, and then you'll do your texture right here. And what it'll do is it'll draw the texture first, and then it'll draw the text right afterwards. This could give you some weird results, but especially if your goal is to draw a texture and then draw something over the top of it, Unity doesn't work that way. So if that's your goal, draw the texture first and then put the text on top of it. So we'll just say hello is what it'll say. And then you'll just use, because you're doing a MonoBehavior, you can just type print hello. And that'll make it so that when you run this, it'll print hello to the screen. Another thing you can do within Unity, they're known as toggles. So you have to have some kind of Boolean value or else they won't work exactly the way that you want them to. So I always do like on and off. And off I want to be true, and on I want to be false, which would just signify that it's off, it's not on. And since I already declared them, I don't need the start and I don't need the update. So I'll say on is equal to GUI.toggle do the new rect again. I want it to be directly after the first one. So screen.width divided by 4. Then I want it to start at the top as well and be the same width that the other one was. So screen.width divided by 4. Always do commas, not periods. And screen.height divided by 16. And then after you do that, you have to do one other thing. You have to declare what is the Boolean value I'm listening for. And so typically you'll just do on. But since I have on and off, I want on to be whatever off isn't. I would just want to be opposite. So what I did is I typed an exclamation point and then the name of off. And then you just write on. And that'll be how you set up the, on. And then you'll end it. And so you can just copy this. And you'll just say off is equal to not on. And you'll set it to be directly below it. All right, and that is all there is to it, to making this on and off setup so that you have two opposites. So that when you run it, it's one or the other. Next thing I want to talk about is using a box. So GUI.box, same process. A label works exactly the same. The only difference between a box and a label is a box has kind of a faint gray background. A label has no background. You can turn a box into a label, and I'll show you how to do that. So you'll just do the rect. So let's say where we want it. So we want it halfway across the screen. That way it lines up with the rest of them. We want it to start at 0. We want it to also be actually this one, let's make it half of the screen. That way you can see it when I run it. And we've also want it to be, we'll make it half the height too. What the heck? Because boxes are always going to be a little bigger. Then next you'll type in whatever your text or your image or your GUI content, whatever you want it to be, is. So this is a box with some information. That's all I want to say. And let's say you want to make a GUI box look like a GUI label. You'll just type GUI style.none. And that's a static variable within GUI style. And what that says is that when it draws it, there's no background. All it is just text. Which if you're going to do that, you're better off just using a GUI label. But this GUI style.none is important if you're going to use these like a toggle. So let's say you draw these toggles, but you want some kind of different image over the top. Well, you would use GUI.drawTexture, and you'll do the rect and make it exactly the same size as your toggle. That way it looks like they're clicking on the image, and you'll just make it so that if it's true, it'll draw something over the top. So because the native toggle kind of looks a little ridiculous, so if you had like a check mark you wanted to draw in there, or you wanted it to look like you wanted it to have some crazy design that you drew yourself or someone else drew for you, and you wanted to take advantage of it looking nice, you would do it this way. It also, same process, so it'll have the rect. There's another constructor you can use, so you have your rect, just whatever the coordinates are, and then you have the texture. So let's say your texture's in a folder called resources down here. You'll just go resources.load and the name of the texture. And that makes things a little simpler for you so that you don't have to have a public variable up here called texture1, texture2, texture3. You just have to make sure to create a folder called resources. It'll simplify your code a little bit, and it'll make it so that it's a little harder for people to change it if they know what they're doing. Just hopefully no one changes the names of them. So that's the three basics, or four I should say. The button, the toggle, the box, the label. I talked about the texture a little bit, which you'll probably use in some way, shape, or form. The last one that confused me, especially when I first started out, is it's known as a vector 2. Well, actually, it's not called a vector 2. What you have to use is a vector 2. It's called the scroll. What is it called? It's called the scroll position. It's called a scroll view is what it's called. So you'll type in GUI.begin scroll view. You'll do a rect, and the rect here will be how big is the viewing area. So let's say you want it to take up the bottom left corner of the screen. You'll say I want it to start at 0. I want it to be screen dot height divided by 2. I want it to take up half the screen widthwise, and I want it to take up half the remaining half of the height. So you'll have that. Then you'll plug in your scroll variable, which always be careful to have your vector 2 equal to that, because that's how it decides how to draw it, how to move things around. Next thing you'll do is draw how big the virtual area inside of it is. So imagine you have a list of labels that you want to have, and you have 1,000 of them. Well, obviously you're never going to fit 1,000 labels on the screen at one time, so you'll do something like this. You'll create a scroll view, have a rect that's whatever the height of each one of those labels times 1,000, and you'll make it so the width is equal to however wide it needs to be. So you'll just do the same process with that, and you'll drop the rectangle. You'll come down here, do a for loop or whatever you want to do to draw everything in there, and then you'll type GUI.end scroll view. And it's really all there is to it. Obviously I didn't do anything with that, so I'll just comment that out. That way when I port it over to Unity to show you guys how this works, that won't be a problem. One last thing I want to talk about before I finish this video up is the GUI.skin. I noticed all my development so far has been for iPhone, so I have made it so that everything looks the exact same. Everything is a fixed fractional value on the screen. And some of you that might not make sense why that matters, but when you have fonts, they won't be the same size as they are on your screen. They'll be however big they're supposed to be on an iPhone screen, which can create some problems for you later on, because an iPhone 5S has a much higher resolution than an iPhone 3G. A 3GS, I mean. And so the font sizes won't be the same. So you'll have to use this GUI.skin.box or .label or whatever you're worried about the font size for. So I usually will create a method called font size, like set font size or something, because then that way it changes everything exactly the same at the same time. So I'll just do that really quickly. So void set font. Sorry I did it in lowercase, it's just habit. I'm used to writing in Java. I know if this is C# I should write set font. So your font will always have to be some kind of integer in order to appear to the screen correctly, or actually to even compile, it has to be an integer. So int font size. And so you'll just do GUI.skin.label.font size equals GUI.skin.box.font size, and it just goes on forever. You can do the same thing if you want to change fonts on the go, or if you want to change anything really. The GUI.skin is going to be a huge resource for you, and I feel like Unity doesn't really do a good job of explaining that to you, so just kind of play around with it. If there's something you're trying to do, like make it so that you have a scroll bar that's a third of the screen, well, you'll just go it'll be GUI.skin.vertical scroll bar, I think. No, it'll be scroll thumb, I'm pretty sure. And you'll go dot fixed width equals, and you'll enter a float here. Same thing with height. Let's say you know how many pixels you want it to take up. So like let's say you want it to be a quarter of the screen in height. Well, you'd have to go online. Maybe I'll make a video in the future on how to do it, but you go online, or I'll check out my video later. that tells you how to convert from pixel height to point height. So you'll notice right now I'm in size 12 font. Well, if I want size 24 font, that's a certain number of pixels on this screen. So you'll have to worry about that. Anyway, I think that's just about everything for you. I'd run this, but it's kind of a pointless little tutorial. Always check down here when you're actually coding to make sure everything's going to compile correctly. I guess I might be able to show you. I might have already made this. So here you go. You have your on, off, so you'll notice they change. And then here's the box. I made it a little too small when I first did this, so you just resize it to be as big as you want it to be. And one last thing I forgot to mention is you have to set this word wrap to be true. Anyway, I think that's everything for you. Hope you enjoyed this video and hope to teach you guys something else in the future. Thank you. Bye.